So in this video we are going to basically see what are the promises and what are async await in JavaScript, and also we are going to see that how to make the API call via JavaScript. So first of all we have to understand that what is basically meaning of the synchronization. So the meaning of synchronization is that uh, doing the work in real time. Suppose I have a queue having multiple processes P1 P2 are running, and suppose there is a synchronization process come, means that I want this process P3 to be done in now. So what the compiler or what the JavaScript do is, in synchronization process it stops all the processes which are working and immediately run the synchronization process, matlab means the process who needs to be done in the real time. So this is known as synchronization process. What is the asynchronization process? Asynchronization process, that process can be done in later on, or that process can be done in parallel with the other processes. So here suppose the P1 and P2 processes are running, and suppose another process P3 has come. So what JavaScript sees that a P3 is a asynchronous process, so it moves it to another queue P3 and tells and promises to this P3 process that I will, in the future I will compile or I will do work on this process. So this is known as asynchronous process. So what are the promises in JavaScript? So let us understand by this diagram. Suppose there is a task, and task is assigned to the JavaScript and telling that, hey JavaScript, do this task. JavaScript tells this task that I will do this task later, I promise, but it promises. So in the promise section we have a pending work, that is, suppose for example this process P3, and that pending work can be done successfully or can be rejected if there is an error in that process. Let us understand by this in example. Suppose the task is of API calling. Okay, so we are telling that JavaScript, hey JavaScript, call this API. So JavaScript promises that I will later call this API. Currently I am working on another process. So if there is any bug in the API call, then the API call will be rejected. Otherwise the API call responses will be showed in the page of that particular task. So let us know that how the basically the API calling, or how the API calling is done via the JavaScript. So first of all let us understand the AJAX concept. What is AJAX? AJAX is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay, so this was the older way of connecting to a server. Okay, now this get replaced by promises and the async await. These were the oldest way to how the JavaScript basically talk with the API calling or the API server. Ajax was the older way. Now we use promises and async. So first, before understanding how to talk with the server, let us understand few terms. First of all, we have HTTP request. What is the meaning of HTTP request? Making the request to the defined API. Okay, so in the HTTP request we have fetch method. Fetch method takes basically a URL, that is fetch, or here we provide the URL of that particular server from where we need to get the data. Then basically is used if the fetch data is loaded successfully, then what we have to do. For that reason we used then function. Then we have a JSON function. The fetched data from this URL is not particularly readable by the naked eye, or it is not clearly visible that how to see the data or how the data is being displayed. To format the data in a particular way so that we can understand or we can read and process the data easily from that API call, we use something known as JSON. So for this example we are using a sample server known as jsonplaceholder.com. In the JSON placeholder is a resource website which provides us the sample server APIs. So here we are using the user resource which is present in the JSON placeholder.com having 10 data. So basically you can visit this URL to see that particular resource. So let us understand that how the code is written. First of all we use the fetch command. in the JavaScript, fetch and the URL, that is fetch all the data from this URL, and if the fetch data is successfully loaded, then then convert that particular fetched result to the JSON. That is basically what we are doing, formatting here, formatting to readable and text. And then if the formatting is done successfully, then what we are doing, then we are logging that data. Okay, and then if there is a reject, so here we have two concept, the resolve concept and reject concept. If the resolve is done, suppose if the resolve thing is done successfully, if the resolve thing is done successfully, then these two command will be run, these then command will be run, and the outer and the compiler will run out. What if we have some rejected, what we have if some rejected option? For that, for applying the rejected option, we use something known as catch. Okay, we use something known as catch here, that is catch the error and display the error. So in this command, this is known as promises in the JavaScript. So all the promises is async, promises are async. So why we are using here then? Here basically JSON is also a type of async function. Async function means it will do work later, so we have to move this console log to the next line. That means that if the result find by the this fetch command, and if it is successfully converted to the JSON readable format, then we only the log the data. But what if we have multiple async functions used here, like dot then function 1, dot then function 2, dot then function 3, then we have to wait for infinite times for each function to be completed. Then here we comes the concept of async await. Okay, so there is a little formatting in async await. So async await can be used only with the functions, so here we are using a normal function, and here we are using an arrow function. So let us first understand by the normal function. So in the normal function, we are doing await and making this function async await and fetch that data, and wait till here the result, this result keyword will wait till here until and unless all the data has been fetched from here and stored in that result constant. Okay, so this is the meaning of await, means wait till here until and unless all the data from this particular URL is not fetched. If all the data is fetched, then convert it to the JSON. If the all the data can convert it to JSON, log the JSON. And if there is any error occur, we use catch here, that is here to implement that particular reject and resolve method, we have to use the try catch block. Similarly we do in the arrow function, but a little only the changed is the how the URL is defined, how we basically here we are using a variable, and here we are calling the get command. Okay, so this was all about this to